What is making your life feel heavy is not necessarily old pain. Very often, what drains a person's vitality is made up of inner parts that lost their function long ago but are still kept like treasures. Jung understood this cruel law of the psyche very clearly. Whatever refuses to die at the right time will begin to rule your life from the dark. It does not come looking like an enemy. It wears faces that are easy to admire: kindness, sacrifice, empathy, devotion, depth. And that is exactly where the tragedy begins. You may think you are living the right way. In reality, you may be staying loyal to an outdated persona, serving complexes that have never been brought into consciousness, using your entire life force to defend a self-image, the unconscious, built out of fear and injury. That is why the harder you try to be a good person, the heavier you feel. The more you try to save others, the more depleted you become. The more you long to be understood, the more dependent you grow. The more tightly you cling to someone's potential, the further you move from what is real. This video is not about adding something new to who you are. It moves in the opposite direction. We are going to look at 5 things in your psychological life that must come to an end, not because you are broken, but because your true self cannot emerge as long as those old structures are still being kept alive. Thing 1. The need to appear good. The need to be seen as a good person does not just exhaust you. It pulls you away from yourself while still making you believe you are doing the right thing. You can see it in very ordinary situations. Some people say yes to helping only because they are afraid someone will be upset with them. Some do not dare express the full weight of their resentment because they are afraid of losing their pleasant image. Some walk away from an interaction with a heavy feeling in their chest, but their first thought is not, "My boundaries were crossed." Their first thought is, "I hope I did not come across badly." When a person keeps prioritizing how they appear over what they actually feel, they are living under the rule of an image, not under the guidance of the self. Jung called that image the persona. It is the social face you build in order to adapt to the world. In itself, the persona is not wrong. Everyone needs one in order to work, relate, and live among other people. The problem begins when you start believing that this is your whole being. The problem begins when you defend it as if your life depends on it. From that point on, you are no longer kind because you want to be kind. You are kind because you are afraid of what will happen if other people stop seeing you that way. To put it more plainly, many people are not addicted to doing good. They are addicted to the sense of safety that comes with being seen as good. The real motive usually does not sit on the surface. You are not always quiet because you are generous. You are not always yielding because you are loving. You are not always smiling things away because you are mature enough to let them go. Very often, it is simply the fear of being named something you cannot bear. Difficult, selfish, ungrateful, inconsiderate. That fear can become so strong that you would rather swallow your true feelings than risk damaging the image on the outside. It is like constantly repainting the front of a house whose foundation is already cracked. People passing by still praise how beautiful the house looks, but the person living inside knows the floor is no longer level. And this is not something that can be resolved with a few easy lines about loving yourself more. The root goes much deeper than that. For many people, being good was once a very real survival strategy. Maybe when you were young, peace at home only lasted as long as you were well behaved. Maybe you learned early that if you wanted to be loved, you had to be agreeable. You had to endure. You had to avoid becoming a burden. Maybe you saw that the moment you showed your real needs, coldness or tension appeared. In that kind of environment, becoming the easy child was not a moral choice. It was a way to stay safe, and what once helped you survive rarely leaves easily. It remains for a very long time, then puts on the clothing of adulthood and continues to run your life. You can see this very clearly in the case of Taylor Swift. What makes her story worth noticing is not fame, but how strongly a lovable persona can take hold. In Miss Americana, she speaks very openly about being held inside the nice girl mold, where a woman is expected to please, to smile, to avoid making anyone uncomfortable, to soften herself in order to be accepted. The important point here is that she did not begin as someone false. She simply grew up inside a very clear reward system. The more agreeable she was, the more loved she became. And that is the trap for many people. They do not perform goodness because they are manipulative. They perform it because that role once brought emotional survival. What matters is that when Taylor began moving away from the need to be polite at all costs, that was not the moment she became someone else. That was the moment a persona began to crack, allowing a truer voice to emerge. From the outside, that kind of fracture is often mistaken for inconsistency, but in reality, it is part of a movement away from the collective image and toward individuation. The more you live to be seen as good, the more easily you lose the most alive parts of yourself. Legitimate discomfort gets pushed down. Healthy anger gets labeled ugly. The ability to say no starts to feel like a betrayal of your image. Over time, you become gentle, correct, agreeable, but no longer vital. Everything looks fine on the surface, but inwardly, something begins to dry out. Jung saw this tension between persona and self very clearly. The persona wants acceptance. The self wants wholeness. The persona prefers safety. The self demands truth. When you spend too long living to preserve an image, the self does not disappear, but it gets pushed underground and begins to speak in other ways. Exhaustion, quiet resentment, the feeling of being used up, the emptiness that remains even when you are doing everything right. That is why so many people do not understand why they have tried so hard to live well and still do not feel lighter. The answer is that some part of them knows they are betraying themselves. Not by doing something immoral, but by repeatedly abandoning what they truly feel in order to preserve a moral performance. A life like that is like a lake that is constantly being drained to water someone else's field. The surface is still there, but the level inside keeps falling. Eventually, you no longer have enough strength to name what you want, what you do not want, what feels wrong, what hurts. All that remains is the old reflex. How do I stay a good person in their eyes? So what is it that must die here? Not kindness, not softness. What must die is your identification with the image of the good person. What must die is the belief that you deserve to be kept only when you are easy to like. What must die is the fear of disappointing someone to the point that you betray the truth inside yourself. Maturity does not mean becoming hard or indifferent. Maturity means you can remain kind without being obedient in a self-erasing way. You can hold a boundary without turning yourself into the guilty one. You can leave someone dissatisfied without panicking and rushing to repair your image. And if something in you tightens as you hear this, then perhaps you already know which part of you needs to be buried. Not so you become colder, but so you can stop living as a character built out of fear. A truly mature person no longer spends their whole life trying to prove they are good. They live clearly, responsibly, with heart, and they do not sell their soul in exchange for approval. If this part is naming something you have carried for a long time without ever finding the words for it, subscribe to the channel and stay with me. The next 4 layers go even deeper, because sometimes what opens the door to freedom is not learning one more new thing, but being honest enough to let go of something old that has ruled you for far too long. Thing 2, the urge to rescue everyone. The second thing that must die is the compulsion to save and heal everyone. It sounds like compassion, but not everything that drives you into other people's lives is healthy. Some people are not truly addicted to helping. They are addicted to the feeling of being valuable when they are needed. That is a very important difference. From the outside, they look like the person who is always there when someone is in crisis, always knows how to listen, always ready to carry the weight, always the one cleaning up the emotional mess in the room. But if you look more closely, you begin to see that they almost do not know who they are when there is no one left to save. You can recognize this in very ordinary moments. A friend calls just to tell you something painful, and before they even finish speaking, your mind has already produced 5 possible solutions. A family member is lost, and you feel you have to pull them out no matter what, as if you cannot settle inside yourself while they are still making the wrong choices. An ex is unstable, keeps making promises, keeps disappointing you, and yet you still cannot let go because there is still a familiar voice in your head saying, maybe if I am patient enough, understanding enough, healing enough, this person will become different. Does that sound familiar? At that point, it is no longer simple care. It is an identity being built around the role of the rescuer. Jung has an image that comes very close to this: the wounded healer. This is not a bad pattern in itself. In fact, there is something deeply real and moving about it. People who have suffered are often highly sensitive to the suffering of others. People who have lived through rupture can often see cracks that others miss. That is why they so easily become a source of support, and why they are often drawn into professions or relationships where holding others up becomes central. But Jung also understood the shadow side of this pattern. When your own wound has not been made conscious deeply enough, saving other people can easily become a way of avoiding the ruins inside yourself. Put more simply, you are so busy putting out fires in other people's houses that you never have to come home and look at the smoke building inside your own. This is where many people stay stuck for decades while still believing they are living a meaningful life. They feel most alive when they are useful. They feel they have a place when someone else is falling apart, and they are the one holding things together. They are often drawn to people who are chaotic, unstable, or directionless, because in those relationships their role becomes clear. They become the emotional support beam in every connection, and like a bridge that has carried too much weight for too long, it may still be standing from the outside, but the metal inside has already started to fatigue to the point where it cannot bear much more. Look closely at a very private reaction that many people do not want to admit. When the other person starts doing better, becoming more independent, needing you less, instead of feeling only relief, you feel a strange sense of loss. That does not make you a bad person. It means a part of your ego has just lost its place. If your worth has been tied too tightly to being needed, then someone else's recovery can begin to threaten your psychological structure without you even realizing it. That is when very subtle things begin to happen. You interfere more than necessary. You exaggerate how serious the problem is. You get irritated when they do not take your advice. Or if this person no longer needs you, you quickly feel pulled towards someone else who is in distress, just so you can keep feeling important. This needs to be named clearly. This is no longer giving from fullness. This is codependency dressed up as virtue. To see this more clearly, Picture a reservoir that is slowly being drained while it still tries to water the entire garden around it. For a while the garden stays green. Anyone passing by would say the reservoir is useful, but the reservoir itself knows the water level is dropping every day. The compulsion to rescue works in the same way. It keeps your energy pointed outward. It keeps you on permanent alert around other people's suffering. It keeps making you feel responsible for lessons they are meant to walk through themselves. And while all of that is happening, the emptiness, the anger, the helplessness, the grief inside you that has never been named, is still sitting there untouched. A very clear example of this pattern is Gabor Mate. He is a physician and author widely known for his work on trauma, addiction, and healing. What draws people to him is not only his expertise, but the particular sensitivity with which he speaks about human pain, as someone who does not stand outside it as an observer, but seems to have moved through that terrain himself. Mate was born into a Hungarian Jewish family, and the legacy of intergenerational trauma connected to the Holocaust deeply shaped the way he understands people, stress physiology, and what an unprocessed wound can do to an entire life. In its healthy form, this is a powerful image of the wounded healer. A wound that has been made conscious becomes a capacity to serve. But this example also helps us see the line that matters. When a wound is acknowledged, it opens the door to deep compassion. When it is not, helping other people can be taken over by the ego and turned into a source of identity. At that point, you are no longer helping from freedom. You are helping because without that role, you do not know where to place yourself. The hardest part is not learning how to care less. The hardest part is learning to tell the difference between care and control, between presence and interference, between love and the need to be needed. Maturity does not mean turning your back on other people's pain. It means knowing how to stay beside someone without invading them, knowing how to offer your hand when it is needed without stealing their path, knowing how to step back when the rest of the work is no longer yours. You stop turning every form of suffering in front of you into a personal assignment. You stop treating someone else's struggle as proof that you have not done enough. You begin to understand that some lessons only open when a person walks through their own darkness. Once that distinction becomes clearer, the way you show up in other people's lives begins to change. You can listen to someone's story without immediately manufacturing solutions. You can sit beside their sadness without treating it like your emergency. You help when you are invited, instead of rushing in by reflex. You no longer feel useless just because you did not save anyone today. And most importantly, you begin to bring that same loyalty back to yourself. The part of you that used to run outward to repair everyone else's life starts learning how to sit still, look at its own fractures, and stop walking away. What must die here is not the heart that knows how to care. What must die is the identity of the one who always has to save. Because when you stop building your worth on other people's pain, your life force begins to return to where it belongs. And that is not a loss of meaning. It is the first time you learn what it means to love without disappearing in the process. Thing 3. The attachment to being understood. What wears a person down is not always rejection. More often, what exhausts you is having to live too long with the feeling that you spoke with complete honesty and still were not truly seen. You place a pain of yours in front of someone, speak in the most truthful language you have, and what comes back is indifference, misunderstanding, or worse, a response that makes you feel as though your whole experience has just been reduced in size. That is the moment that really hurts. Not because the other person disagrees, but because something in you begins to panic, as if they do not understand, then maybe what you feel is no longer fully solid either. This is a very hidden place. On the surface, it looks like a need for communication, but if you go one layer deeper, you begin to see that what is operating is not just the desire to be heard. What is operating is a dependence on an outside witness to confirm that your inner world is real. That is why you explain for too long. That is why you return to a conversation that is already beyond saving, just to say it one more time. That is why every misunderstanding leaves you so drained. What you are trying to preserve is not only a relationship. What you are trying to preserve is your right to trust your own perception. This is why some people walk away from a conversation feeling hollow, as if something has just been taken from them. They are not only disappointed by another person's lack of care, they have also been thrown back into an old wound. Am I real if no one confirms what I'm living through? Each time that happens, the inner world becomes like a room whose lights have been switched off. You are still there. The furniture is still there. Everything is still in place. But you start stumbling because you can no longer see clearly. And then the old reflex appears. Turn the lights back on by making someone understand you. Keep talking until the other person nods. Get validation first, and only then feel at ease. This is exactly where Jung would look. He did not see maturity as finally getting the whole world to understand you. He saw maturity as the process of slowly building an inner center strong enough that you no longer live on the borrowed agreement of other people. In the process of individuation, a person begins to step away from the crowd, not by fighting everyone, but by no longer handing over the authority to define their inner truth. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. That line touches this issue with unusual precision. As long as your point of support still rests in other people's reactions, you will keep living like someone asking for permission to exist. Only when you turn inward deeply enough do you stop bargaining with the world, just to be told that what you feel is valid. The roots of this pattern are usually not in the present. It grows out of places where your feelings were denied from the very beginning. A child says they are sad and is told there is nothing to be sad about. A child remembers something that hurt them and is told they remembered it wrong. A child reacts strongly because a boundary was crossed and is labeled too sensitive, overthinking, too much. Those sentences do not just hurt the child in the moment. They distort the child's relationship with their own perception. The child learns that inner experience is not reliable enough on its own. It needs someone else to confirm it before it can be trusted. And when that child grows up, the same pattern enters love, marriage, friendship, and every important conversation. You can recognize this pattern in scenes that are painfully familiar. You tell your partner that you have felt lonely for a long time. Instead of listening, they ask why you are only saying this now, or they immediately start listing everything they have done for you. And suddenly, you are no longer just speaking about loneliness. You begin presenting evidence. You go back through old messages. You bring up the times you already tried to open the conversation. You work to make your feelings sound so reasonable that they cannot be dismissed. But the more you prove, the farther you move away from the original feeling itself. It is like walking into a room to say that you are hurting, only to be pulled a few minutes later into the task of defending your right to hurt. That is the moment when you need to stop and look very carefully. Not everyone has the capacity to understand you, and not every misunderstanding can be repaired through more explanation. Some people cannot enter your inner world because they have never entered their own. Some people can only hear what does not threaten their defensive structure. If you keep knocking on that door, the first thing that will erode will not be the relationship. The first thing that will erode will be your inner dignity. You will begin treating your own feelings like a defendant forced to prove its innocence. A very clear example of the strength that comes from no longer living by the need to be understood is Simone Biles. When she withdrew from several events at the Tokyo Olympics to protect her mental health and physical safety, the public response was anything but mild. She was questioned, judged, and misread on a global scale. But what matters is not how severe that misunderstanding was. What matters is that she did not break with her own decision just to win approval back. She did not wait for the whole world to grant permission before trusting what she knew was true in her body and mind. That is a rare form of self-trust, and it comes very close to what Jung meant when he spoke about a person gradually standing in their own inner knowing. If you have ever gone through a moment of being deeply misunderstood and still had to learn how to stand your ground, leave a comment. Just one line about the moment you realized you could no longer keep asking other people to validate who you really are. Letting go of the need to be understood does not mean closing your heart. It is not a form of coldness, and it is not the kind of withdrawal that cuts itself off from the world and says people can think whatever they want. It is simply a very important shift in the inner order. You share in order to connect, not in order to obtain permission to be yourself. You still hope to meet the right person. You still value the feeling of being understood. But you no longer collapse when that does not happen. You may feel sad, but you no longer kneel before another person's blindness and beg for a mirror that can reflect you back to yourself. This is what real maturity starts to look like. You are misunderstood, but you no longer rush to fix it immediately. You no longer over-explain until you are exhausted. You begin to realize that some truths inside you do not need the whole world's approval in order to become true. Your feelings do not become less real because someone else is not deep enough to touch them. Your experience does not lose its value because another person has no language for it. Once this begins to sink in, a great deal of the energy that used to leak away through endless explanations starts to return. What needs to die here is not the desire for connection. What needs to die is the hunger to be validated by others before you dare stand on your own truth. Because when you stop begging for understanding, you do not lose your humanity. You simply stop leaving your self-respect waiting outside someone else's door. And that is often the moment when an inner life finally begins to grow a spine. Thing 4. The illusion of who someone could become. What keeps a relationship going is not always love. Many times, what keeps you there is the belief that one day this person will become the person you have been seeing in your mind for a very long time. You are not attached to what they are actually doing. You are attached to what you think they could do if they became more aware, more mature, shaken enough by the thought of losing you, hurt enough to finally change. And that is where your inner life begins to drain very slowly. You are no longer living with the real person in front of you. You are living with a promise that has never fully taken shape. This is a very difficult kind of entanglement to leave because it does not look like obvious mistreatment. It is like standing in front of a dry field while still seeing a green garden in your mind. Other people look at it and see cracked earth, but you still remember the seeds that were once planted there, and you still believe that one more season, one more rainfall will change everything. The problem is that you are loving more with imagination than with sight. You are staying with someone's potential while their reality has already told you many times who they are. Jung had a very precise word for this state: projection. You are not simply seeing the other person. You are covering them with an image woven from your deepest needs. You take what you lack, what you long for, what you need in order to keep hoping, and you place all of it onto one human being. From that point on, you are no longer relating to them as they are. You are relating to a figure your mind has outlined, lit, and deepened. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. This line from Jung lands hard here. Many times, holding on to another person's potential is not just about loving them. It is also a way of avoiding another truth inside yourself, that there are losses you are still not ready to grieve. Think back for a moment. How many times has this person already shown you clearly who they are? They avoid real conversation when it is needed. They promise change and then repeat the same pattern. They only shift when they are about to lose you, and then everything goes back to the way it was. They have beautiful moments, sincere moments, moments that make you believe you have finally touched the best part of them. And those moments become what you cling to. You use one good hour to justify 10 exhausting months. You use one apology to soften an entire repeated pattern. You use one rare version of them to cover over the person they are being every day. That is why you cannot quite leave. It is not because you do not see the problem. It is because you are still seeing another person at the same time. A person who, in truth, exists only inside your hope. This is not optimism. More often, it is a very deep defense mechanism. Because if you saw that person exactly as they are, you would have to face things that hurt much more. You would have to admit that you have poured too much time into this, too much trust, too many moments of closing your eyes and letting things slide. You would have to admit that what you are waiting for may never come. And the hardest part is this: you would have to face the possibility that the person you have loved most may not be who they really are, but the meaning you attached to their ability to change. In other words, you are not only trying to save a relationship, you are trying to save a story so that your life does not feel too wasted. This is where Jung becomes especially sharp. Projection does not tell you much about the person being projected onto. It tells you about the one doing the projecting. It shows that there is a need inside you that has not yet been brought clearly enough into consciousness. Maybe it is the need to feel safe after too many years of instability. Maybe it is the need to be repaid for a childhood you did not get to choose. Maybe it is the belief that if this person finally becomes someone who knows how to love well, then everything you endured will not have been for nothing. So you are not only waiting for them to change, you are waiting for life to return a meaning to you. That is why you hold on to the illusion for so long. If this still feels far away, think of a house with a cracked foundation. The person living in it knows the floor has shifted. The doors no longer sit right. The walls have started to split. But instead of leaving, they hang new curtains, replace the lights, buy new furniture, because they still believe the house can become the home they once imagined if they care for it long enough. The illusion of who someone could become works in the same way. You keep investing in what is not real yet, so that you do not have to face what is real already. And the more you invest, the harder it becomes to let go. Because letting go is no longer just the end of a relationship. It feels like admitting that you spent years living inside a blueprint, not inside a house you could actually live in. This is the most painful part, but it is also the most freeing. Letting go of the fantasy is not just dropping an expectation. It is holding a funeral for a person who never actually existed. You do not just lose them. You lose the future you quietly built with them in your mind. You lose the story that one day they would understand, one day they would grow, one day they would love you the way you need to be loved. There is no real maturity in love that does not pass through this kind of grief, because only when the illusion dies can your eyes begin to see reality without the fog of hope covering it. Prince Harry is a fairly clear example of what it looks like to stay attached to what a relationship could become, instead of looking directly at what it is. He seems to have held on to a great deal of hope that his family and the royal system would eventually change, eventually listen, eventually become something different. After all the fractures that had already happened, the important point here is not to judge his story as right or wrong. The important point is the psychological pattern, which is very familiar. You keep investing in a person, a family, or a relationship because you believe its future will be different from its present. You do not leave immediately, not because things are fine, but because you still hope that what you are enduring will eventually lead to a better outcome. This is also what many people do in marriage, in love, or in their relationship with family. They do not stay attached to what is actually happening. They stay attached to the future they do not want to give up. And then at some point, everything has to return to one question that is plain, unsentimental, and deeply saving. Does this person, exactly as they are today, deserve a place in my life? Not the version they may become, not their potential under ideal conditions, not the version of them that briefly appeared in a few beautiful moments, but the person who exists, who acts, who chooses, who repeats. When you become clear enough to live inside that question, a great deal of fog begins to lift. What needs to die here is not hope. What needs to die is illusion. Because many people are not trapped by love. They are trapped because they cannot let an image die. And only when that image is finally buried, do you stop loving through imagination and begin choosing your life through truth. Thing 5. The identity of being wounded. There comes a point when what holds you back is no longer what happened to you. What holds you back is that you have grown used to living as someone shaped by what happened to you. You do not just carry the wound, you begin to see life through it, choose people through it, react through it, and understand yourself through it. Everything new that enters your life has to pass through an old gate, and that gate keeps asking the same question. Will this hurt me the way it did before? If the answer seems to be yes, you pull back. If you do not know yet, you stay guarded. If the answer seems to be no, you still do not fully relax, because the wounded part of you has grown used to living as the gatekeeper of your entire life. This is the place where we need to speak very carefully. Pain is real. Trauma is real. What it leaves in the body, in sleep, in the way you respond to closeness, distance, abandonment, control, all of that is real. No one has the right to turn this into cheap motivation. Jung did not do that either. He understood that some experiences do not disappear just because you have finally named them correctly. But he also understood something even harder. A wound can begin as an event and then slowly become an identity. And when that happens, you are no longer simply remembering the past. You begin to let the past organize your present. You can see this pattern in very quiet places. Some people have been in therapy for years. They understand their family history clearly. They understand their attachment pattern accurately. They can explain why they fear closeness, why they endure too much, why they keep expecting the worst. They understand almost everything, and yet their inner life still turns around the same old axis. They enter a new relationship with the heart of an old one. They stand in front of a real opportunity with the nervous system of the years when they were rejected. They hear an ordinary sentence, but the part of them receiving it is still the part that was once made to feel inadequate. In other words, they no longer just have a wound. They are living as if that wound were the truest thing about them. Jung would not call that healing. He would call it identification with the wounded part. And that is a major difference. Because when you identify with the wound, you no longer say, "Something painful happened to me." You begin to live as if that pain is what I am. It is like a house that was struck by lightning in one corner, and then the person living in it decides to move all the furniture into that blackened corner and stay there for the rest of their life. Meanwhile, the house still has other rooms. It still has windows. It still has light. It is still livable. A wounded identity is what happens when the most painful chapter of your life gets promoted into the title of the whole book. And this is where we have to be honest, one level deeper. There are unconscious benefits that make this identity very hard to release. When you have lived for too long as someone who was hurt, it gives you an explanation for many things that have stopped moving. It gives you a place to belong. It makes other people handle you more gently. It saves you from having to fully face the harder question. From this point on, how am I going to live? Saying this is not a judgment. It is simply a very human truth. Anything that once helped you survive will be hard to let go of, even when it is quietly keeping you trapped. Armor worn for too long begins to stick to the skin, and when the time comes to take it off, you are not only afraid of the pain, you are also afraid that you will not know who you are without it. That is why letting go of a wounded identity does not mean denying the past, and it certainly does not mean pretending you are fine. It is not about forcing yourself to be positive, strong, or inspiring while your inner world is still in pieces. What needs to change here is the place the wound occupies in your psychological life. It no longer sits on the throne. It is returned to its proper place. An important chapter, a real scar, a part of your story that deserves respect, but no longer the part that gets to write every decision, every relationship, every image you hold of yourself. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Jung said that. He was not denying what happened. He was giving you back the right to become more than the thing that once hurt you. When that shift begins, you start to notice a few very clear signs. The past is no longer the first thing you bring forward to explain yourself. You can still speak about it, but you no longer have to live from it. You no longer look at every new person through eyes that only know how to brace. You no longer assume that every opportunity will collapse in the same old way. You begin asking a different question, not, "How did that break me?" but, "From that very thing, who am I learning to become?" It is not a light question, but it opens a door. It moves you out of the role of someone defined only by their history and into the role of someone participating in the making of themselves. So what needs to die here is not memory, not truth, not the scar. What needs to die is the idea that the scar is the deepest identity you have, because maturity is not the absence of marks left by what you have been through. Maturity is when those marks no longer get to arrange your whole life for you. And that is often the moment life force begins to return, not because the past has disappeared, but because it has finally been placed where it belongs. If you've made it this far and feel a heaviness settling in your chest, I don't think it is because these things feel unfamiliar. More likely, it is because you have lived with them for far too long. There are parts of you that have been straining for years just to be loved, just to be kept, just to be seen, just to avoid losing what you once placed all your hope in. And if today you are beginning to see that some of those parts have reached the end of their life, that is not failure. It is a very deep form of honesty with yourself. Jung did not see transformation as becoming someone else. He saw it as the moment you stop identifying with what is no longer your true self. What leaves in that process is not the best part of you. More often, it is the psychological structure that once helped you endure, adapt, and survive, but now keeps you from living fully. So, if letting go of something in yourself makes you feel sad, that is completely natural. Some changes do not arrive like victory. They arrive like a necessary farewell to a version of you that carried you through the hardest years of your life. And perhaps this is the one thing worth remembering most at the end of this video. Real liberation is not rising above your life. It is returning to yourself in a truer state, with less strain, less performance, less clinging. You are still you, only no longer being led by those old structures. And sometimes, that is exactly where a life with depth, aliveness, and real peace begins.